The wind howled through the reservation, a mournful cry that echoed across the vast, desolate landscape. The land stretched out under a bruised sky, a tapestry of ancient forests and windswept plains. Women were vanishing, disappearing without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and unanswered questions. The elders spoke in hushed tones of ancient legends, their faces etched with worry. The whispers spoke of the Wendigo. The disappearances had started subtly, a slow drip of fear that gradually morphed into a torrent of panic. A young woman, vibrant and full of life, would vanish without a trace. The weight of their absence hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket of despair. Suspicion and fear took root, poisoning the well of trust that had sustained them for generations. The only clue, the only thread connecting their disappearances was the chilling silence that followed, a silence that spoke volumes. The reservation, nestled within the embrace of sprawling forests and towering mountains, had always held an ancient energy. Legends and folklore were woven into the very fabric of their existence, tales passed down through generations, each story a cautionary reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and the supernatural. The Wendigo, a creature of insatiable hunger, born of greed and desperation, was said to roam the desolate wilderness. It whispered temptations on the wind, promising power and sustenance in exchange for the ultimate sacrifice. And in the wake of the missing women, the ancient stories took on a chilling new resonance. Detective John Riley arrived at the reservation with the setting sun. His weathered face, etched with the lines of countless investigations, held a grim determination. Riley wasn't a man of myths and legends. He dealt in facts, in evidence, in the tangible remnants of shattered lives. But there was something about the atmosphere of the reservation that chilled him to the bone. He'd been brought in to bring order to chaos, to find a rational explanation for the unexplainable. This wasn't just a case. It was a wound on the soul of a community, a wound that ran deep and bled ancient fears. The wind howled through the reservation pines, their branches swaying like mournful mourners. Detective Riley stood on the precipice of the endless woods, his trench coat whipping around him like a phantom. He could hear the whispers of the wind as it snaked through the trees, whispering tales of sorrow and loss. His job was to find answers, not to be swayed by folklore and superstition. He adjusted his fedora, the brim casting a shadow over his determined eyes, and ventured into the heart of the woods. The forest floor was littered with pine needles and fallen branches, a treacherous carpet that muffled his footsteps. Detective Riley inhaled deeply, the scent of fear clinging to the air like a shroud. The woods were silent, save for the mournful sigh of the wind and the distant caw of a crow, a sound that echoed like a harbinger of doom. He had been following a faint trail, barely discernible to the untrained eye, for what felt like hours. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just following a trail, he was being led. He paused, listening intently, his hand hovering near the revolver holstered at his side. He pressed on, his senses on high alert, his gut churning with a mixture of fear and grim determination. The flickering flames of the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls of the shaman's tent, creating an eerie tableau of light and darkness. Detective Riley, his face creased with skepticism and a grudging respect for the old man's wisdom, listened intently. The shaman, his eyes ancient pools reflecting the firelight, spoke of a darkness that had settled upon the land. The Wendigo walks among us, the shaman whispered, his voice raspy with age. It hungers, detective. Riley ran a hand through his hair, his skepticism warring with a growing sense of dread. Some truths were ancient, primal, and whispered on the wind. Days turned into weeks, and still the forest held its secrets close. Riley, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging acceptance of the impossible, found himself drawn deeper into the mystery. He found strange symbols carved into the trees, ancient markings that spoke of a power that predated his understanding. He spoke to the elders, listened to their stories, their hushed whispers of a darkness that had haunted these lands for generations. The weight of the missing women pressed down on him, their faces a constant presence in his mind. He had to stop it, but how do you fight a creature born of darkness, a being of myth and legend? The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine needles and damp earth, and something else. Riley, his senses on high alert, paused in his search, listening intently. The forest was alive with unseen eyes. He could feel it. He was being watched, hunted. He pressed on, his hand hovering near the revolver holstered at his side. He pushed through a thicket of trees and emerged into a small clearing. And then he saw it, hanging from the branches of the oak tree like grotesque ornaments, were scraps of clothing, a scarf, a torn piece of a dress, a single hiking boot dangling by its laces. Riley felt a presence behind him, cold and menacing, and turned to face his pursuer. Standing at the edge of the clearing, its eyes glowing with an unholy light, was the creature from his nightmares. Riley, his heart pounding in his chest, drew his revolver and fired. The Wendigo let out a deafening roar, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the forest, and lunged. The elders gathered around a crackling fire, their faces etched with worry and ancient wisdom. The flames reflected in their eyes, casting flickering shadows that danced with the legends they wove. They spoke of the Wendigo, a creature born of the coldest winter, of the deepest despair, a being of insatiable hunger, its heart a frozen wasteland, its soul consumed by an eternal winter. The Wendigo, they said, was once a man. He had become the Wendigo, a twisted mockery of his former self, cursed to walk the earth forever, driven by an insatiable craving for human flesh. The Wendigo, the elders said, was not merely a creature of the physical world. It was a spirit of greed, of insatiable hunger, of the darkness that dwelled within the human soul. It feasted on fear, on despair, on the very essence of what made them human.
It whispered temptations on the wind, promising power and sustenance in exchange for the ultimate sacrifice. It preyed on the weak, the lost, the greedy, twisting their desires, amplifying their darkest impulses.
They spoke of the Wendigo's mark, a symbol of corruption, a sign that the creature had marked its prey. A spiral, they called it, a symbol of the never-ending hunger that consumed the Wendigo and all those it touched. The spiral, they said, was a reminder that greed begets greed, that hunger only breeds more hunger.
It was a warning to resist the temptations of the Wendigo, to guard our hearts against the darkness that lurked within. The elders spoke of the Wendigo's curse with a mixture of fear and reverence, for they knew that the creature was not merely a monster to be feared, but a reflection of our own capacity for darkness.
The elders' stories filled Riley with a growing sense of unease. He had come to the reservation looking for a rational explanation, a tangible solution to the disappearances plaguing the community. But the more he learned about the Wendigo, the more he realized that some truths defied logic and reason.
The wind seemed to carry the elders' whispers through the trees, their words echoing in the rustling leaves and the groaning branches. The forest felt different now, alive with unseen eyes, filled with a palpable sense of dread.
Riley found himself questioning his own skepticism, his reliance on logic and deduction. Could there be some truth to the legends? Could the Wendigo be real?
He thought of the missing women, their faces etched in his mind, their absence a heavy weight on his heart. He had to find them, had to bring them home. But how do you fight a creature born of darkness, a being of myth and legend?
The next morning, Riley ventured back into the woods, armed with his revolver and a newfound sense of urgency. The forest seemed to press in around him, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Something ancient, primal, and utterly unnerving.
The elders' warnings, they're echoing in my ears.
He followed the faintest of trails, his senses on high alert, and then he saw it, carved into the trunk of a towering pine tree, a series of deep scratches, the Wendigo's mark.
The Wendigo was real, and it was hunting in these woods.
His heart pounded in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. He pressed on, his grip tightening on his revolver. He had come too far, sacrificed too much. The spiral, etched into the ancient pine, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a chilling symbol of the hunger that gnawed at the heart of these woods. Riley touched the rough bark, feeling a cold, unsettling energy emanating from the mark.
The forest has grown so quiet.
The air heavy with anticipation. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Riley felt a prickle of fear crawl up his spine. He knew he should turn back, retrace his steps, seek the safety of the village, But the missing women urged him forward. He couldn't abandon them.
I can't abandon them, not now.
With a deep breath, Riley pushed past the marked tree, venturing deeper into the heart of the Wendigo's domain. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, as if the sun itself feared to penetrate this cursed place.
Each step forward felt like a victory, a defiance of the unseen force that held these woods in its grip. My senses were on high alert, every snapped twig, every rustling leaf sending a jolt of adrenaline through my system. I was the hunter and the hunted, my own fear fueling my determination.
The trail had vanished completely. Riley relied on instinct, on the subtle cues of the forest itself to guide him. The trees seemed to close ranks around him, the undergrowth a labyrinth of tangled branches and thorny vines. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own breathing, heavy and labored in the oppressive air.
I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, the chilling sensation of being stalked.
Then a flash of movement in the distance, a flicker of something dark and swift darting between the trees. Riley froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver at his side. He waited, his breath catching in his throat, for the creature to reveal itself. The moment passed, leaving Riley with a lingering sense of dread. The forest floor sloped downwards, leading to a clearing shrouded in an unnatural mist. A sense of wrongness, of profound unease, settled over Riley as he cautiously approached the edge of the woods. The air here hung heavy and cold, carrying with it the faintest whisper of decay, of something ancient and evil.
I pushed through a tangle of thorny vines, the scent of decay intensifying, and stepped into the clearing. The mist, thick and cloying, clung to me like a shroud, obscuring the edges of the clearing, amplifying the sense of isolation, of being utterly alone.
The silence here was absolute, broken only by the pounding of Riley's own heart. He scanned the clearing, his hand gripping the revolver, his eyes struggling to penetrate the swirling mist. And then he saw it, a figure, tall and gaunt, its outline blurred by the mist, stood at the far end of the clearing. It didn't move, but a sense of immense power, of primal hunger emanated from it, chilling Riley to the core. Slowly, as if drawing strength from Riley's terror, the figure began to turn. Antlers, twisted and gnarled, like the branches of a dying tree, emerged from the mist, followed by a face that seemed sculpted from ice and shadow. The Wendigo, the creature's eyes, burning with an unholy light, locked onto Riley's, and a wave of primal terror washed over him. He stumbled backwards, his hand shaking as he raised the revolver. The metal felt cold and useless against the ancient evil. A sound like the grinding of ice on stone echoed as the Wendigo opened its maw. He squeezed the trigger, the gunshot deafening in the oppressive silence. The bullet seemed to pass right through the creature. The Wendigo didn't flinch, its gaze never wavering. The empty clicks of the revolver echoed as the creature began to advance. Each step slow, deliberate, filled with a terrifying grace. The mist swirled around the creature, transforming it into a nightmare. Then silence. The reservation, once a place of vibrant life and tradition, now seemed to hold its breath, trapped in the icy grip of an ancient fear. The whispers on the wind spoke of Riley's disappearance, another soul claimed by the insatiable hunger of the Wendigo. The search parties, their hope dwindling with each passing hour, eventually returned empty-handed. They found no trace of Riley, no sign of a struggle, only the chilling silence of the woods, the silence of the vanquished. The Wendigo, its legend now etched in the fear of a community, retreated back into the shadows, its hunger temporarily sated. But the elders knew deep in their hearts that the creature was not gone, not truly. It lingered in the whispers of the wind, in the shadows that stretched long with the setting sun, in the heart of the forest where the line between myth and reality blurred. The Wendigo, born of greed and despair, remained a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within the human heart and the ancient evils that haunted the edges of their world.